come through, but welcome everybody to the final Sifted Talks of the year. I'm Tom Nugent, the managing editor at Sifted. And yeah, welcome to today's talk in partnership with Box. So we're going to be getting into the year in review. So a lot to get through, dominated by deployment of AI agents, not just for customers, but internally as well at organizations. Our data at Sifted shows that AI agents as a sector, companies there have raised the most amount of money across the year compared to any other. Same for deal count as well. Defense, biotech, drug discovery, and data centers and AI infrastructure also high up on that list. It's been a year of big AI announcements in countries like the UK, France, and of course, America too. And as we draw the year to a close, we have reporters on the ground in France and Germany looking into a new trend of forward deployed engineers, the Palantir-inspired model finding its way to AI companies in Europe as well, with those like Mistral, 11 Labs, and Hays Company all hiring for the role and predicting that to be the next talent fight in 2026. So to get into the year in review with me, I have Sam Crisp, lead tech strategist at Box, Sabrina Castiglione, chief financial officer at Omnea, Dinika Mahtani, a partner at Cherry Ventures, and Aron Gelbard, co-founder and CEO of Bloom and Wild. Sam, I'm going to kick off the conversation with you. We're all a year more experienced with AI and using these tools. How would you sum up what's changed this year for you?
Yeah, this year has been really interesting from us, especially as we've moved a lot from sort of chucking AI in and getting the teams to experiment and go wild and like look at ways in which they can make use of the technology and bring useful stuff back to us, through to a more intentional and like that less experimental and more executing pace of taking what's valuable and sort of starting to drive that more into the business. And so like experimentation, everything we've done is now intentional, governed, and aligned with our business outcomes as we try to drive to more and more value out of the AI piece and less around everyone go nuts, go wild, see what's out there, through to actually aligning that to what we want to achieve.
At what point, whether it's this year or maybe towards the tail end of last year, did that happen? You go from chucking stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks to actually coming up with an internal strategy for actually using this stuff. What does that look like in practice for you guys?
Yeah, I think there's been a really good question, and I think there's been this sort of broad acceptance, and especially because our CEO is so sort of forward thinking a lot of this stuff around the fact that we have always wanted to come from experimentation to strategy. And so getting that executive alignment down and thinking about how we are going to go from the experimentation piece has been up front of mind, and then we've started to lean more and more on it. And I think the sort of the way in which we've thought about it has been around how do we pick what our big bets are, and how do we take our organization has come up with hundreds of AI agents from different people in different roles, trying to find stuff that will really impact what they can do, through to where are we going to strategically align resources and drive things forward. And that's come down to us looking at what is highly repeatable on one axis and what is requires or supporting of really critical thinking on another axis. So in finding things that are in that sort of top right bucket is really important for picking what we're going to do and how we're going to deliver it.
Sabrina and Aron, I'm going to come to you next before we get the investor perspective from Dinika. So Sabrina, what does this year look like for you in terms of the deployment of AI internally, and what are the lessons that you've taken from that?
Yeah, I think kind of a similar realization to Sam, kind of looking back that, we're now starting to really be able to kind of identify and understand where those really prime use cases are. And from like a similar approach, it's one of those points where, there was that phase of like everyone experiment, everyone tries thing, but you don't actually want to automate chaos. Automating chaos just drives more chaos. Kind of you want to automate like the highest kind of value opportunities sort of in your business. So for us, this looks like, and also for our customers, it looks like getting data in really, really good shape, making sure that the foundations are there that provides that kind of underlying critical infrastructure for AI to actually be incredibly effective. And then also, now that we understand the landscape a little bit better, looking into what are those opportunities not just to kind of standardize things in order to make them kind of work well, but also from like that change and cultural perspective. If you can say to people when they're onboarding, especially if you're in a high growth business like ours and you're onboarding kind of a lot of people, here are some of the very specific ways that we use AI, the ways that those work, and the ways that you can get the most out of it. That's really, really important. And also, the other thing that I think has changed in the last year is the general approach to, from like a policy perspective. One of the areas of the business that I look after is also risk and compliance and legal. And I think, in the very early days of, when ChatGPT and everything first came out, everyone was very panicked about data, right? And it's one of those things that we've all been worried about for years and years. But I think now that that's evolved to kind of really understanding what does risk mean in AI, because it's not just about the data that you put in and the data that you get out. It's also understanding what are the things that you do or don't want AI to do. And actually, like, I think in many ways, that's a bigger question that an organization needs to be able to understand for itself. Are you operating in a space where AI can recommend, or AI can decide, or AI can execute? And understanding these things as a business and where you sit and how you are set up to be able to operationalize each of those parts is also really important.
So where can AI decide? Where can it execute? How have you gone about figuring out what that looks like in practice and where you're able to apply that trust?
Yeah. So, in terms of kind of where are the guardrails, it ultimately comes down to kind of like the impact and the criticality and the risk. If you have lots of kind of like repetitive but relatively low risk things, something whereby a human's going to be in the loop at some point before a really critical decision is made, you can let an AI go pretty far with execute. There are certain parts where at most you would want it to be researching, kind of, potentially offering up views and like providing kind of the background links for someone to go and like look into. There's lots of kind of like fairly low risk repetitive tasks that are primed to just kind of let an AI kind of go after the fact. If it's not really going to have high impact, if it goes ever so slightly wrong or it's easy to change afterwards, by all means, kind of let it run, monitor it, keep an eye on it. But understanding what those things are is going to be different depending on what business you are. I think one of the big pieces, like in that vector, is to what degree is what you're doing impacting people. That's kind of like a really critical lens to kind of always make sure that you're not going too far and just letting like the AI run.
I want to, as we sort of get into the conversation a bit more for the next 50 minutes or so, I also want to be able to bring in everyone who's listening as well. So if you do have questions throughout, please do send them to the Q&A function, which you can see on the bottom of your screens. There won't be a specific time at the end where I pull them out. So I'll be picking up questions throughout the conversation. So yeah, I would love you listening to shape the conversation that we're having as well today. So please send your questions as and when they come up. Aron, I'm coming to you for the same question that I've asked Sam and Sabrina. Define your year for us. What's the sort of main takeaway? How have you been applying AI internally as well?
So we've had a really exciting year of AI at Bloom and Wild. I like Sabrina's framework of thinking about, I think it was inform versus decide versus execute. And we've been really leaning into execution. So I guess our background is we've used AI, or I mean, it's been called sort of machine learning or other things for years for what I would call customer facing decisions. So in particular, as we've expanded our range of flowers and gifts that we offer, we've put a lot of work into trying to make what we show different customers more relevant and more personalized based on the information that they've shared with us. And so that's a model that we've been building and refining over time for years. I guess what's changed this year is there's been a massive ramp up in our adoption of third-party models, and this means that we can operate a lot of other functions outside of our core digital shopping flow more effectively. So the most unsurprising one is our customer delight function, where like many other companies, we're now deploying an AI tool to respond to many of our customers' inquiries and looking to increase this even further over time. A lot of folks think of this as a cost-saving measure, and it's partly that. But it's also really interesting in terms of giving customers a better experience. If you need a human to answer every query, then either you have a lot of redundancy in your system of having people waiting around in case you get somebody messaging or calling or whatever, or you have a queue. And then in a business like ours, that's a problem because often people place an order shortly before a cutoff time, and then there isn't that long for them to change it before you actually post the flowers or the gift out. So being able to respond to more customers in real time isn't actually just a cost-saving thing, it's also a customer benefit. And for me, that's a really valuable framing. We often look at things in terms of that customer and business win-win in our business. Some of the sort of more unusual things that we've ramped up this year, a big one is in the creative production space, for example. So we're a flower and gifting company, but we're also very much a photography and videography company. We sell a very visual suite of products. And so being able to depict those accurately and alluringly is really important. We've done a lot of work to really ramp up our production of lifestyle photography using AI. This has been really important with our launch of our new standalone greeting cards range, which came out last month, where we'd have spent weeks literally taking photos of a really large range of cards in the various settings, but instead of being able to use AI tools to do that much more scalably. So I'm excited to see us adopt AI, not just in some of the sort of like more typical places, but also in places that are quite bespoke to our business. Final comment that I wanted to make is I think we have moved from a phase of sort of experimentation to a phase of assessing and really trying to measure impact. I think we've got further to go here. So yes, our organization is AI forward, and we can talk more about some of the culture work we've done to make that the case. But for me, for it to really have a benefit, I don't want people to just be able to cite the ways that they're using AI. I want to understand how it's impacted our OKRs, be they customer delight or revenue or profit or something else like that. And we've got some good examples here, but I think we've got further to go.
Dinika, I'm going to come to you next. We've obviously heard Sam, Sabrina, and Aron take us inside their companies. You obviously see a broad array of companies. Cherry have done deals across Europe this year in places like Germany, Switzerland, Denmark, France, the UK. So you have this. You can zoom out for us a little bit. If you were to put some of these tools and the applications of AI through an MOT, what would pass and what's not quite there yet?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. But I'll zoom back for a quick second. So at Cherry, obviously, over the years, we've backed a combination of different types of companies, right? So looking at our non-AI native companies at Cherry, for which all of us at Partners still are very much involved in strategy, sit on boards. 2025 was an extremely big year for adoption, trialing, scaling. But I would say for a lot of our scale ups, we're still a ways away from standardization. For a subset of companies, this has started with efficiency and productivity initiatives. And some of that has already been mentioned. So starting, kind of bottom of the stack with coding, how you write code, how you develop code, how you edit code, and how engineers, talk to and interact with each other using AI. That's a core building block of how a lot of our companies work these days. But that's an efficiency and productivity initiative, right? Same with customer service. That's efficiency, productivity, and how you can still keep productivity gains while keeping your customers happy. I would say for a subset of our companies who've taken this one step further, for which I think Aron has done also a really good job here, as he's articulated, you quickly move into core strategic initiatives or revenue drivers, i.e., companies that have been built in the early 2020s now having full-blown AI native products. And that's been really impressive to see. I would say in terms of certain products that have done really well. So at Cherry, we also have put out surveys to our entire portfolio saying, hey guys, what are the AI native products that you absolutely love and use all the time? And a couple of our portfolio companies do this extremely well at the board level even. Just two examples here. So we have a company in our portfolio in the data observability space called Dash Zero. And in every single one of their board materials, they have a whole section of tools that they love, tools that they find are sort of net neutral, and tools that they've been using for a while. So AI native tools that everyone in this group would know about, first name basis, that are not doing well, sort of over time. And that's why I think this concept of standardization for a lot of our scale-ups has been has been chosen as not the approach that folks want to take, i.e. standardization can work in terms of frameworks and how you set budgets for engaging with AI. But what we're also seeing are some of these products get incrementally better over time. I'll give you an example. So Claude Code and Cursor are two of the most used tools in our portfolio on the coding side. And some other tools, I won't mention them here, have over time become less and less effective. And so that's been really interesting for us to observe.
When you're talking to portfolio companies, what do those conversations look like when a new model drops? Take us inside what happens when Gemini 3 comes out, when OpenAI's 5.2 model comes out. We've had numerous new models this year. What happens, Dinika? What do those conversations look like? Take us inside that a little bit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of companies and at Cherry, we provide a lot of benefits to our portfolio, as many venture firms do, right? So we have a great relationship with with the Amazon team, AWS team, who kind of provides a lot of tokens and benefits and credits to portfolio. We do the same for OpenAI. We do the same with Anthropic and with a whole list. And so our responsibility is to know when the model drops, to engage with the providers, to make sure that our portfolio companies know when this is happening, and to understand how this will, flow through in terms of their work and workflows. It is not frequent that an AI native company, for example, that's been built on OpenAI, say GPT-4 or 5, will switch when Gemini drops right away. It just doesn't work that way, right? There are too many internal processes and systems that are being built out of core models. I will say though that the best and most nimble companies that we have are model agnostic. So of course there are some companies that I work with that just use one model. Most of the AI native companies I work with use multiple. And then when they expect a new model to drop, they slowly embed them in sort of the core stack, trial and test it a little bit, see how it works, if there are any bugs, if it works in terms of how their internal workflows can be sort of preserved, and then scale that. So it's a multi-step process. I don't think anything changes when a model drops right away.
Sam, I want to come to you for impact. Like, what have you seen this year? How has using these tools actually had an impact on you at Box? How do you measure that as well? Like, what sort of ROIs have you seen?
Yeah, we've seen some brilliant stuff come out of the experimentation stage and then get moved through, and some great examples of our teams and our organizations starting to be at the very forefront of what the capabilities are. And the example that is closest to my heart is sort of our RFPs piece and very much focused on productivity. Your sales teams love an RFP to land. They love to chase them. It's inbound. Here we are. It's great. Like, we should go after this. And actually, not everything is always a good fit, and not everything is always worth the effort to do a really, really solid response, because often you get them, it's an Excel sheet, return the Excel sheet, it's not going to close anything. And so we, as part of that process of sort of the ideation piece, we came up with this agent that would not only validate that the RFP was a good fit for us and look for any of the gotchas to identify where we should be working with our partner organizations on specific capabilities, but also to then help build out the response document as quickly as possible. And we've seen sort of everything down to about 90% time savings for individual like responses, which means that not only are we chasing only high value stuff that has a chance of closing, but we're able to give really solid responses back. And that's just one example of the productivity gains. We've seen automation pieces come through where entire workflows are operating. So we have, for instance, like support agents being able to more quickly answer questions, or that net new capability piece. So our lead gen agents, for example, will be able to do deep analysis on a qualified lead and actually deliver far more value to the downstream team than they were able to before. And so some really like measurable, tangible capabilities that just simply weren't possible pre the deployment of the models and pre us starting to use them at scale.
So Sabrina, I'm going to come to you. Sam's touched on this a little bit on what they've seen at Box, and we've had a question from someone in the audience, which is, where have you seen AI used to create previously unachievable value, differentiation, performance? What have you done this year that you maybe weren't able to last year or the year before? Help take us inside that sort of ROI.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. Big. Previously unachievable. That's like a really high bar. I think most of these things, what I would say is a lot of them do tend to have been, unachievable, just not unachievable in a sensible, reasonable time frame. And it can be anything across the business. I even look at things like the candidate experience for the people that we interview, kind of being able to actually make sure that everyone's getting like much more detailed and deep feedback on like interview processes and things like that. Things where in a previous world, someone isn't going to have like an hour's time to go and like put that together on like every single case. But even if I look down internally kind of into, parts of the organization such as product, or where we're looking at new markets or like potential areas to enter, just the time that it takes to do the kind of background research or to find pieces of the research that were previously necessary, you're sometimes looking at compressing what would have been weeks of like investigative work into the space of hours, if that. The ability to kind of go and look across disparate data sets, whether it's across our Notion or our Google Drives, or even like recordings from like call meetings and internal meetings, with different teams that perhaps aren't necessarily interacting on a day-to-day basis, and to go and like very quickly be able to distill that down into like the core themes, the areas of difference. So even from, something as, let's call it like banal as like candidate feedback, through to kind of the really needle moving stuff as to kind of, what should we be prioritizing to build and why? Where are the areas of like real opportunity when building products? It's really transformative. And I think one of the interesting points that I think has kind of been touched upon is that kind of that agnostic kind of perspective, because I do think there is kind of a big question as to where and to whom the value is going to accrete, kind of like from AI. And I think certainly like as an operator perspective, not as someone kind of building like a foundational model company, the ability to be able to kind of in a very agile way change out the tools and the models that we're using is definitely like a huge benefit to us, where there's effectively kind of cost parity across that. But yeah, I think it's that real cross-functional, very qualitative feedback, subjective like areas that it really is incredible how much more we can do. Yeah, I think those would be kind of like great examples that I think the world looked very different even 12 months ago.
Sorry, my connection cut out ever so slightly, then apologies. I'm going to pick up on that and come to you, Aron. You mentioned before, and obviously the implementation of all of these tools requires a mindset shift among your employees, among leadership, among management. How has culture changed this year at Bloom and Wild, and how are you getting people to embrace these tools and to work differently than they have before?
Yeah, so look, I think in the early days there was some sort of AI skepticism. I think we're now past the era of AI skepticism, and people, around our organization, whether they work in more technical roles or not, understand that this is part of like modern work, just like when people learn to use Google or something like that 25 years ago. And so I think we're through that. We then went through a bit of a phase of, is it sustainable? And we're a B Corp, and we focus a lot on sustainability, and we've done quite a lot of work to map the proportion of our overall carbon footprint that comes from our technology, and then within that from AI, compared to sort of moving our physical products around the world, and showing that it's a very sort of tiny slither of our ever reducing carbon footprint. So we've sort of gone through those hurdles, and I think we're now in a world of people sort of understanding that this is mainstream and going to become increasingly so. With that, we've done a few things. I guess you have to segment your team into the sort of like leading edge people who are going to be like playing around with AI, people who are sort of happy to go along with the mainstream, and then people who are less confident in it. And so we've formed a group of AI champions. We've formed various Slack channels for people to share what they're doing, get help from each other, help each other out. We've got some people playing sort of internal evangelist roles internally, including one person in particular who's really sort of spearheading efforts. And I think that's helped to drive adoption, mean that the group of sort of leading edge people is increasing in size, and then the group of sort of people in the middle that are following them is increasing in size as well, because they're seeing more and more implementations. They've got more and more people that they can turn to get help with, and there are fewer and fewer folks being left behind. We've to support this, we've had OKRs. We've had AI in our OKRs every quarter at a team OKRs level. So really setting expectations around people's adoption of AI and measuring how much that's happening. We've also been running pulse checks every quarter to understand how much people feel they're using it and how comfortable they are with it. So it's quite sort of multi-layered. One thing we found difficult is finding the right external training that can sort of really ramp up people's knowledge. And I think while the training can be sort of generically useful, it doesn't have the context of what we do in our business, or really help people with this key step of trying to map out their workflows that they're doing repeatedly, and then figuring out what the AI solution is for those. So that requires quite a lot of internal hand holding. And I think we're seeing a ramp up there, but again, something that there's more to do on next year.
Sam, I saw you nodding a lot through that. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, it does actually. And I think it's been really interesting to see how teams have been self-enabling and going out and getting, learning things, and then coming back and bringing what they've learned back into the organization. But to Aron's point, actually undertaking some of that transformation piece in a guided and logical sense is still harder for a lot of organizations. It's still something that we find ourselves providing advice and guidance on and supporting up quite a lot. So definitely see that one from the people that we've been working with.
Sabrina, sorry, go ahead, Sabrina.
I was going to say, like on that point, I think the two ways I've seen this work is one, either if you have like a very specific kind of use case for which it's very helpful to have industry experts and best practices, to find people to work with who specialize on that particular problem rather than AI implementation specifically. They'll often have seen how AI is implemented to that one end. For example, this is what we speak to a lot of customers about in the procurement space. When it's something that is kind of very niche or context specific to your business, the one thing we do see is that actually, this isn't something that should run as like a side project for like the junior person on the team or the intern. It's something where you kind of need at least mid-level, but probably senior operators who can kind of balance both that deep understanding, not just of the like the part of the business that they're embedded in, but the broader business context to kind of really kind of go and explore and understand that use case and drive it forward. And I think you do have to have and identify those people in the business who are kind of well set up to drive that there. I do think there is definitely a piece here around how kind of AI and services, whether that's coming from externally or within your business, comes together. But I think it's quite critical at this phase to like really find the right enabled person to drive that forward.
And if I may just build on that point and to a point you made earlier, Sabrina, about that whole like cultural piece you alluded to, and like embedding AI enablement into the culture of the organization so that people are looking at things through that lens, it's really, really important to drive those. Because if you've got your more senior people, sometimes, not always, can be the people who are, I know my process, I know how things work, I'm at the back end of the pencil for change, if you will. And so actually saying this is something that we're exploring to support you and make us collectively better, and ensuring that everyone is doing that in a way that makes sense to them on a personal level as well as an organizational level, is really important.
Aron, we've had a question come in which touches on a point you made earlier around sort of introducing AI to your OKRs. This person wants to know if how you, and I guess Sam, Sabrina, Dinika, across your portfolio as well, how you're quantifying this impact. Is it 10% increase in efficiency gains, 50%? Like, what metrics are you actually tracking? Aron, I'll come to you first, given it was your point, and I think it would probably be helpful if the others can chime in on that as well.
Yeah, so there's an individual answer to this, and there's a like company answer to this. Individually, it's hard to say that like somebody has got an X% increase in their personal efficiency. So at an individual level, we're looking for people to be using AI with a particular regularity, multiple times a week, whatever it is. At a team level, we're asking that each team is putting in place at least one AI implementation that is having a significant impact on a routine business process in that team. That's something for next quarter. So now we thought about, should we put a number on significant, but then it's a little bit difficult because for sort of marketing versus for HR, that will probably be like numerically quite different. So we want to let teams do that and define what we think that is, but sort of setting the expectation at a team level. For a company, from a company perspective, I want it to be showing against our P&L. And we did a slide for our board in a recent board meeting. Actually, I'll go back a bit. Earlier in the year, we did a slide for our board where we did a sort of map of some of our core company's business processes and plotted on all of the places where we're using AI. And then I wanted to return to this and put a number against each bubble to show what the impact was on the P&L. It's actually surprisingly difficult to do, not because I think people, because they're sort of not real, but because they're just very difficult to measure. And in a lot of cases, we are doing more than we otherwise would have done with the same amount of resource, rather than, we've made headcount savings or something like that. We're also in a growing business, and, we'd rather reinvest into further growth than sort of bank profitability upside at this point, given our sort of overall profit position. So all of that means that the measurement is quite different at different levels. But looking ahead to next year, I think this needs to be a comfortable 7-figure EBITDA impact from AI adoption in our business, measured across those various ways. Otherwise, I think we're not doing enough.
Sabrina, how do you measure that same thing?
Yeah, so I've obviously got sort of like a CFO's perspective on this, right? So a lot of business costs kind of tends to bucket into, especially in kind of generally professional businesses. Aron, obviously you'll have inventory and sort of much more complicated things, but typically you have headcount, and that's like a lot of your spend, and then you have your indirect spend, your tooling and things like this, and then you'll have your moderately fixed costs that probably AI isn't going to do a lot for, such as like your office space and things like that. And And if you kind of aggregate that out, and we've recently been out and successfully completed our Series B fundraise, there are kind of a lot of metrics that aren't new that sort of track kind of a given business's efficiency. But what's definitely true is that the expectations for those metrics have shifted. So, there's a lot of common metrics out there, some of which are very well known, such as gross margin, what does it take to deliver a given service? Things like revenue per head count, which kind of just generally looks at kind of how overall productive your business is at generating revenue. Things like your sales and marketing efficiency, like what new business can you get in for a given kind of expenditure, LTV to CAC. And I don't think that those things are new in any sense, but you can definitely see the expectation shift in that all of those are expected to get materially better kind of over time. And that's very much kind of what we're hearing as well from the investor perspective, that's where it's coming through. What we are typically not seeing, similar to what Aron said, is that people are actually reducing absolute headcount. Like that is actually something that I can't actually see any direct examples that I know of people doing that because of AI, but the expectations for what you can do with headcount has definitely gone up. So, if you were doing X revenue with 100 people, that X is now higher than it was before.
Sam, is that X higher than it was before for you as well?
Yeah, and I was I mentioned obviously earlier the RFPs piece and around and sales research and how we're sort of driving greater productivity out of our sales teams. But the other one that we've been measuring and looking at was very much around like self-service internal sort of problem solving and challenge solving, where we came up with a mechanism for enabling teams to go and ask questions and get that answer back from the corpus of the various different support articles, tools and solutions that we've got available to them. And we were speeding up a huge amount. We reckon our value team who measure this type of thing for our customers did a sort of self look at us and reckon that we saved about 1,000 hours to return to teams for high value work on the basis of us being able to do that. So measuring just that productivity piece and getting them from low level stuff through to higher value stuff is really key.
Dinika, across the portfolio, who's getting this right? Where are you seeing really good examples of actually measuring that tangible impact?
Yeah, I've got two great examples. So one of my companies has a sales leader who launched a build your own workflow competition. So the rules were use N8N, and everyone sort of in the sales organization has to build a workflow that they present in sort of their sales all hands, and the winning workflow needs to then be scaled and adopted across everyone. So I thought that was really an interesting and a push in sort of a way that teaches folks how to use some of these tools, the no-code tools, but also pushing towards efficiency, which was what this competition was meant to do. That was one that sort of landed really well. A second one is in a recent board meeting that I had last week, when we were talking about 2026 planning, basically exactly kind of what Sabrina mentioned. So we were talking about, full stack engineering headcount for 2026, and directly embedded in that discussion on how many millions of dollars or pounds need to be invested. It was, have you factored in the efficiency up increases that Cursor or Devin or some of these other tools that you're using are bringing? And therefore, if you say that they are important, then this should be directly factored into the number of increases of actual human heads that you need. If your efficiency is getting sort of increased by, put a number on it. And the team didn't have a number, but they said, we love it, we use it every day. And so we pushed them as a board to say, what's that number? So those are two, I think, very tangible examples. The other one I would say is, I think for the best performing companies that we have, they're using AI to develop new products much faster. And so it's not just impacting sort of the sales, the cost base, but also the sales and revenue numbers. And we're seeing that to be actually, again, exactly like Sabrina said, where you can either scope a new market or scope a new product. You can increase your net revenue retention, your upsell motion is there. And so I would say the best in class companies are turning this into like a revenue driver.
I want to stick with you as well, Dinika, for a conversation around like broader things in the market that you've seen in terms of value creation and what else we've maybe not talked about yet that you're able to talk to, given your position as an investor.
Yep. So I can just briefly look back on 2025 at Cherry. So we made 16 new investments this year. I would say out of those 16 new investments, 14 of those were either AI native, so built with AI from the ground up, or in the AI infrastructure space. And by infrastructure, I mean, chips, Proxima Fusion, we would count sort of as AI infra because sort of without energy, you can't really have AI. And sort of just to reinforce, I think a lot of the market is very much thinking about the application layer as where all of the future value accrues. And even in this group, right? So we like to use tools that make our jobs easier. I would say from the investment perspective, we very much see the AI infrastructure layer as something that is not solved at all, because I don't still think that we have the right ingredients to make the usage of AI models, applications, everything in between agents ubiquitous. So I would say, the infrastructure layer certainly isn't quite solved as yet. And we're very excited about anything sort of that happens in that space, which again sometimes crosses the traditional VC investment world as you like, but we think that's extremely important. Another category is sort of everything that's happening in agent adoption. So that's one area that I'm actually super excited about that I think is farther away than we think, because right now the rails for adopting agents within either enterprises, scale-ups, or as individuals are not there yet. I'll give you a very simple example. If I want to instruct an agent to help me make a purchase, there are no rails right now for where the agent can securely keep my payment data, can securely transact. And rails are being built around this, right? Led by Stripe and Google, and they're coming about. But right now, there are still real gaps within the ability for agents to actually do meaningful tasks in the way that humans are. And I'm very excited about sort of, again, the space is very early. We invest early in great teams who are tackling very hard, ambitious problems. But this is one where I'm very excited to, spend a lot more time in and hopefully make new investments in 2026.
Yeah, talking on that, if we were here in 12 months' time having the same conversation, what do you want to see in, if we take the AI infrastructure layer first, what do you want to have seen in the next 12 months to start creating that value?
Yeah, so I think in the AI infrastructure at the moment, so inference costs are still really high. They're high, and all of you sort of are using models. A lot of my companies are using models. A lot of my AI native companies are not very profitable at the moment. There variances in their gross margin profiles, but there's still a very far ways to go to sort of getting up to sort of software level margins, and extremely far ways to go. It's not like that's what we require in a world where you don't need to have 80% margins to have extremely great businesses. In fact, you can have it much lower, but there still needs to be a path to sustainable businesses. And so I would be absolutely delighted if a combination of tools and picks and shovels plays is what we call it in investor world, are either founded or scaled to help models be deployed more cheaply, in order for them to be more readily adopted when sort of the next economic crisis is here. And so that's one big thing that I would wish to see next year at this time.
Sabrina, I'm going to come to you because you touched on obviously the recent raise, and we spoke last week when we were prepping for this around sort of fundraising and VC expectations, and what you kind of saw from the investors you were courting this year. Like what's changed? Like what were those conversations like when you were raising around expectations?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a very similar story to what we've said before. I mean, the first thing is that it's not that all companies necessarily are AI native, but all companies need to be very clear on what their position is around AI and how they're using AI. I'm not sure that there's really a world in, oh no, no, we're not doing that at all, is like really kind of like a valuable proposition right now. I think it's one of those ones where it's like, it's getting to the point around similar to asking people whether or not they're using the cloud, right? Like it's going that way, and that the technology is going to be that ubiquitous. Like all companies will find different ways to use it, but there is an expectation that that's there. That's very definitely baked in. And then I think a lot of it is around, and I know it's like a very boring word, but effectively like productivity, right? Like whether or not, you know, there are profitable ways to kind of drive this. There are very burny ways to drive this, but just those expectations around what you're doing and what you're getting out as a business for every dollar that you're putting in. I think, to the discussion we've had here, there are still kind of a lot of open questions around the pace of like these technologies and at what point will some of those AI scaling costs kind of become more affordable? At what pace will the technology continue to evolve? How agnostic should you be versus building into one particular model where it may be that another model could very quickly overtake it? When there are a lot of those kind of deep open questions, I think the other thing that we're seeing is that people are looking for like real deep quality and value. Something whereby, if things are a bit faster or a bit slower in progression in the technology landscape than they might be, because there are really kind of big open questions. Are the fundamentals of the business like genuinely solid? I think people are keen to, I guess, kind of avoid sort of the 2020, 2021 environment where a lot of kind of money went into businesses on the basis of their current velocity without thinking about how that would really kind of, continue over a long period of time. Fundamentally, people aren't investing in businesses for the next 1 or 2 years. This is, a 5 to 10 year journey at least. And people want to understand kind of what the value creation journey is over that. Is there like a meaningful, robust, well-built business that could evolve from that? Taking into account that I think, to Dinika's point, like there will be some pressure, certainly on some points in margins, whether that's from model usage or compute, or even whether that's like the addition of services in order to make sure that the customers are getting their value out of AI. And I think there's a lot more flexibility on those points. But that long-term value creation story, I'm seeing it crop up earlier than I perhaps would in a similar fundraising round in like the early 2020s.
Aaron, I want to come to you to jump off of that a little bit because we also spoke around sort of board communications around the use of AI and ROI and how you approach that. Like, what expectations have been put on you this year? How have you met them?
Our board have been less forceful than I expected them to be. So I would have thought that they would have been saying, like, why are you not using AI more, and why is there not more impact from it? And actually, I've challenged some of our board members back and said, I would love to know about what best practices from other companies that are non-AI native companies that are really driving financial results from AI. And they haven't had loads of examples. And so it's in keeping with this point raised. Sorry, I think it was Dinika that said this, that people are not, or maybe Sabrina, are not realizing the headcount savings yet. And it's more a question of doing more with the same resource than having these very tangible P&L impacts. And maybe that's because we're in a world of venture-backed, growth-oriented companies, and if this was a conversation, with like blue chip companies in very mature industries, and maybe the focus would be different. But I think our board has been quite sort of satisfied with our efforts and how we're trying to be on the front foot here. But if I'm honest, I'm a bit surprised that they aren't pushing us more.
On the I want to pick up on the headcount point and come to Sam for this next question, because we've had a question from one of our listeners, which is, yeah, how is AI changing your hiring strategy? I'm seeing fewer junior roles. How are you developing early career talent in today's AI-driven environment? So yeah, Sam, I want to put that to you. It's something we've seen as well this year through a lot of our startup life coverage from my colleague Miriam. It's a conversation that's just happening a lot. Like, what actually happened to that entry level?
I think this is a really interesting one. I think what we're seeing here is, like, we've talked about it on the call so far. Like, essentially, the way we look at AI is as a capability expander and as a way of getting more value out of the people in your organization much quicker and driving more from each of them. We've seen that in our organization from a lot of our junior hires. And as a result of some of the initiatives that we've run, we've got them to be much more effective, much quicker. They are trained up to a higher standard much earlier, and they are delivering value much quicker in their career than they would be otherwise. And that is a result of some of the work that we've done with AI and enabling them to be. You talk earlier about self-service and supporting themselves much earlier. I think if I were to speculate, a lot of organizations are going to start to see the same thing. And what they're going to see is much more value being derived out of their junior hires much earlier. And at the moment, you kind of see that sort of that pipeline potentially slowing as everyone figures out what that's going to look like. But actually, in the longer term, if I have junior employees who can deliver huge amounts of value, like outscale to the level at which they are currently at, there is a huge incentive there to invest more in them and to drive some of that additional capability at that lower level. So if this is something that we are seeing, I expect fully that it will be brief while organizations sort of figure out and then drive more out of it as a result.
We have about 8 minutes left. I have a couple of questions I want to get through that involve a quick round the room. Sam, I'm going to stick with you. If there's one thing you're leaving behind in 2025, what is it and why?
Ooh. I think there's a few bits that I'd say we were leaving behind. I think a lot of the sort of dumb work. It used to be, it was, let me Google it for you. Now it's let me ask the AI solution for you. And I think a lot of that is going away, and we're starting to get to more cultural development around what is acceptable around usage and how we're driving value out of usage. And that's the piece that we're kind of dropping and changing and starting to go ahead.
Sabrina.
Yeah, I think especially in a world where there's like a lot more uncertainty in a good way in some cases, in the sense that like this technology is potentially so transformative, we really don't understand where it's going. I think what we really need to be leaving behind is unfocused efforts, because I think especially when there's that much variance in kind of where the outcomes could be, really deeply questioning at this moment in time, what problem are we trying to solve and which of those problems is most important is really, really important. So I think we need to be leaving behind kind of like that sort of sense of urgency without that sense of focus.
Aron, what are you leaving behind and why?
Skepticism. We've moved beyond it. Seriously, though, I think at the start of this year that was maybe okay. This is real, and it's transforming how we work every day. And if people aren't on that train of, oh, I'm not sure, and maybe it's not for me, and this and that, I don't have got time for that anymore.
I have a friend like this, and I keep telling him to get on board. I'll tell him Aron Gelbard thinks he should as well.
Oh God, don't blame me.
Dinika, what are you leaving behind in 2025 and why?
Yeah, I think we've been on board sort of this way for a while. But I think for me more personally, I'm gonna leave behind typing. I'm starting to draft using voice, and starting to do like have a meaningful modal shift in the way I work and in my life. And I had like a brush of carpal tunnel earlier in my career from like overly typing during my banker days. And I've just used a lot of the AI tools to date, whether it's 11 Labs or, you know, the email functionality that's available to me to draft my emails with voice, and such, and do that more on the go. So that's helped me a lot.
Amazing. Sam, I'm coming to you again. Your wish list for 2026, what's on it?
We have some exciting stuff that we're working on with automated agents. And when those come, I think there's going to be some brilliant stuff that we're able to do, not just for ourselves, but for our customers as well. Genuinely very excited about the stuff that we're doing there.
Sabrina?
I'm actually going to steal Dinika's point. Yeah, as someone really trying to kind of implement AI in as many parts of the business as possible, whether it's the product or operationally internally, I think some of that infrastructure, like to enable, the rank and file of most companies to be able to roll out these tools and these capabilities much more extensively and with much more ease, is high on the list. Yeah, like right now, it's probably one of the hardest things right now, which is not will it work or would it work? It's how do we make it work?
Aron?
I want to make sure we're involving our customers next year. And we had some really interesting research that got shared internally this morning, where um, our customers are really keen for us to use AI to make their experience of shopping with us better, but it's not in the way that we thought. We thought that they're all going to be clamoring for agentic shopping solutions because we read digital publications where this is talked about a lot. Actually, they want to use AI to make it easier to find products on our apps and sites with like better matches. So it's interesting. I think sometimes we can get caught up in a bubble of like the tech forward world, and when you go into like real customer land, some of their expectations aren't necessarily what we think they are. So I want to make sure that we're staying really close there and making the right sorts of leaps for them.
And Dinika, what's on your wish list?
I think speed and ambition are on my wish list, as they will forever be, for sort of European founders, but founders that we work with, and in general, I think that I think you have to just fully embrace the era that we're in. The ability to do things fast has never been closer in my life and sort of my working career. And I just wish that all of the entrepreneurs that I work with and beyond do the same.
As I draw us to a close, I want to thank everyone who has joined. To summarize, I think there are, as Dinika said earlier, great opportunities in the AI infrastructure layer. Agentic payments rails as well was something you picked out as not quite there yet. Headcount and efficiency, I think that's a really interesting one to watch, Sam, that as companies figure this out, you'll actually find that the entry-level roles, you do need them. It's just the people in them can do a lot more than they did before and quicker. Remove all your unfocused efforts. Sabrina, great point on that. And then I have underlined multiple times, leave behind skepticism, which I think, is a very, very good point as well. So thank you, Sam, Sabrina, Dinika, and Aron, and our partner at Box for your support on our webinar. Thank you so much for everything. See you for the next Sifted Talks in 2026. To find out what that's going to be about, please go to sifted.eu/talks. And I'll see you all in the new year. Thank you ever so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.